If you are a person out there who believes that you can actually buy manufacturing execution systems off the shelf, and with a little bit of configuration, you have a full-blown manufacturing execution system, I want you to come on the podcast and let's have a debate and let me ruin your career for you, okay? All right, let's talk about manufacturing execution systems. Take 0. All right, so on the 4.0 Solutions LinkedIn channel, there has been 2 posts over the last week. So the team posted struggling with build versus buy MES dilemma, and then they followed that up with what the heck is a manufacturing execution system. All right, the reason these posts are going out there is we're focused on solving a problem in the industry, okay? And last year and a half ago, we did a MES boot camp on showing people how to build manufacturing execution. Why? Because everyone eventually builds their MES system. There is nobody, absolutely nobody, who buys MES off the shelf at all. I mean, can you buy MES and do a subset, a function of MES completely off the shelf? Maybe. I've never seen it happen, ever. Not once. Whether I'm using Sepasoft's modules, whether I'm using Traxxas, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. There is no scenario where I have ever seen MES executed completely off the shelf, ever. Why is that? Well, the reason is because MES it's not a solution. It is an abstraction for a series of functions in the business that are part and parcel. They are literally core to what that business does. Manufacturing execution is actually where manufacturing takes place. So these posts are coming out because we're getting ready to do an accelerator for the MES Bootcamp. It's the number one request we get after the UNS workshop. I really was holding off on doing it because the boot camp was so much work. It was really exhausting to put on. It was rewarding. It was worth it. But we pushed it out because it was going to take an enormous amount of time to prep doing an accelerator and another boot camp. So they're doing these posts centered around MES. The comments in these threads show why it's so important that we're doing these types of things. So that's what we're actually going to go over. So I'm going to go over the thread and answer some of the questions in here. All right, so the first one was struggling with the build versus buy MES dilemma. Here's how to solve it without breaking the bank. So in the early phases of digital transformation, building strong MES capability is critical to delivering fast time to value. Fast time to value means that for every dollar I spend in a certain amount of time, I want to see maximum return. So short time to value would be I can, every 2 weeks, I can deliver some value for the business in a sprint, or every 6 weeks in a release, I can deliver N squared value for the business. That's time to value, okay? Do we buy off-the-shelf MES or do we build our own, okay? The reality is that off-the-shelf MES solutions often come with high costs, limited flexibility, and long implementation timelines. You guys could fill the thread up here with fucking nightmare stories. But what if there was a way to build your own MES using an open IoT platform and leveraging existing infrastructure for faster results and lower costs? And there's another piece I didn't put in here that I would have put in here. Going through the process of building MES teaches you more about your business than you already know. One of the things that always stands out to me is whenever I go into an organization, I'll go into an organization and I will ask them to explain to me their manufacturing workflow. How do you sell things? How do you plan to manufacture? How do you execute manufacturing? How do you monitor and control your plant? How do you monitor and control your devices or your assets? How do you manage inventory? How do you ship stuff? How do you get paid? And how you do it all over again, right? Consultants are going to tell you all sorts of, that manufacturing is really complicated and all that. Yeah, at a 1,000-foot level, manufacturing is really fucking hard, okay? At a 10,000-foot level, it is not. It's pretty simple. Every manufacturer is exactly the same. I mean, it's incumbent upon organizations like SAP to convince you just how hard it is at a 10,000-foot view, so you'll spend tens of millions of dollars on ERP systems, okay? But let's go ahead and go through the thread here. But what I want to stress is it's amazing to me the number of manufacturers who don't know how their business operates. And one of the advantages of going through and building MES, you're going to build no matter what. If you're going to put MES in, you're going to build. Whether you like it or not, you're going to. Whether you build 2 years from now after you figure out you can't buy, or whether you're going to build from day one where maybe you buy something off the shelf and then you bolt onto it, you're going to build. You're going to fucking build. You are going to fucking build. Anybody who's telling you otherwise is fucking lying to you. If you are a person out there who believes that you can actually buy manufacturing execution systems off the shelf, you can buy them off a shelf, okay? And with a little bit of configuration, you have a full-blown manufacturing execution system. I want you to come on the podcast and let's have a debate and let me ruin your career for you, okay? All right. So let's get into the comment here. Let's take a look here. I'm starting to wonder if there's such a big difference now with more focused MES solutions that can start small for value and grow as needed. Things like INS3, iData Ops Peak Board. Yeah, absolutely, John. But you're still building. Okay, it's not that you're not buying something. You're not buying any software off the shelf. I mean, hell, when we do the MES bootcamp, we're using Ignition as the platform, but we're not using Sepasoft's modules when we're doing it. I mean, we're using Ignition as the platform to build manufacturing execution, and we're highlighting all the places of why it's so important. One of the challenges with manufacturing execution is that software developers have to make assumptions about how your business operates in order for them to build master data models, and information models that will work for MES functions like OEE calculations, traceability, quality calculations, Pareto charts for defect tracking. There's hundreds and hundreds of functions that fall under MES, but there are the core four that basically everyone does relatively well off the shelf. But John brings up a very good point. Are there lots of different options out there? Absolutely. Okay. Let's use Flexware comments here. Okay. All right. Let's point something out here. Flexware developed their own MES system. When I met Flexware, I think it was 8 years ago. Okay, Flexware was just here's who Flexware was 8 years ago. They were an integrator based in Indianapolis. They primarily focused in the life sciences industry, and they got their engineers out of Purdue. They focused in life sciences, and they were formulated. They had a pretty common model where they'd get a bunch of profit from life sciences, and then they would invest in these little subgroups inside the organization. One of the groups they invested in was this Traxxas group. They were all in on Traxxas. And I went to Flexware and made the case, through one of their guys. I went in and I made the case, hey, you guys really should be working with Ignition, okay? Flexware, I meet with their CEO. We have a couple of conversations. I invite him to one of my clients. So then they go to ICC. They've never worked with Ignition before, ever. They have no relationship. This is 2016, 2017, I think. And I meet with them at dinner, the CEO, and I say, hey, man, you should actually. I think we had a Zoom call, or we had a video call, and then we met at ICC. And I told him if I were you, I'd be all in on Ignition. Fast forward, he likes what he sees. They jump in all in on Ignition. They become a premier integrator in a couple of years. They built their own MES. So even Flexware has proven the point that you're going to build. Flexware is an integrator who was originally selling an off-the-shelf solution like Traxxas, and now they're advocating for something that they build. And I assure you, Spark MES is wrapped inside of Ignition. It is a built MES system. And I guarantee it's incredibly flexible. And I guarantee that they don't make assumptions about the data models that they have to have for their customers. Okay? All right. So they're only proving the point that you have to build, not buy. That doesn't mean that you're not buying something off the shelf. What I'm saying is, if you believe that you can buy a manufacturing execution system, okay, off the shelf, and you can build a couple of screens and have a full-blown MES system, you are fucking kidding yourself. You are kidding yourself. There is a reason, if you look in our industry, L1, L2, L3, L1 is on the edge, PLC HMI. Vast majority of people in our industry work in PLC HMI. 60%, I think, is what it is. 60% in the digital transformation community. It's more than half of people. That's where their specialty is, controls. Okay. Directly above that's a supervisor control and data acquisition layer. It's a smaller percentage of people work in that supervisor control and data acquisition layer than work in controls. And then it is a microscopic number that works in MES. So when you get to the MES layer directly above supervisor control and data acquisition, it is a microscopic number. If you look at it's this huge pyramid. Why is that? If less than 5%, actually it's less than 10%, depending on different studies you look at, it's somewhere between 5 and 10% of manufacturers have a digital manufacturing execution system. Okay? If 5 to 10% have a digital manufacturing execution system, but all of them have the same problems, then why is it we don't have more people working in the MES layer? It's because it's fucking hard. It's really, really, really hard. It's so hard, you can't build an off-the-shelf solution. Okay? I mean, anybody who's critical of, like, you know, the Core 4 and you got to build versus buy, come on the podcast. Let's have a debate. I want you to make the argument to me, where I'm going to get to a couple of these comments. I want you to make the argument to me in front of thousands of people why it is track and trace is a core function of MES, which it is not. Here's how we know it is not a core function. Okay? It's what everybody wants, but you don't have to have track and trace. And you want to know why you don't have to have track and trace? Here's how we know. Because so few fucking organizations do. Using paper and spending 3 weeks to do traceability across their organization, they get one quality return at the end of and then they have an intern spending 3 fucking weeks looking up the genealogy of a product that got built. That isn't digital track and trace, and that is the norm. That's the standard in industry. That's how you know it isn't a core function. Okay? That's how you know it's not a core function. Here's the other thing. When manufacturers start with MES, track and trace is a goal down the road. It's not what they have to have today. Now, there are people out there who need traceability today. There are lots of people. But to argue it's a core function is fucking folly, because any of you who work in manufacturing execution systems know that you are not building traceability in your proof of concept. You are not building traceability in the first phase. It is a rare situation where you are doing track and trace in the POC. It is a rare situation where you're doing track and trace in phase 1. It's rare. Okay? All right, let's go back to these comments. Build, yada, yada. All right, let's go to this next post. This is where the meat of it is. So what the heck is manufacturing execution? So the core capabilities, yes, this includes OEE. I'm going to talk about this now. So work order management is number one. There's basically no implementation of manufacturing execution where you are merging together planning and ERP with execution with control at the SCADA and PLC HMI layer. MES is the shim between the two. It's where you're converting what you plan to sell to what you've manufactured. There's no MES implementation where you're not doing some type of work order management, even if you're using an abstract work order. That is, maybe I've got work orders, individual manufacturing orders in SAP, and in my proof of concept, I'm not using those individual manufacturing orders, but what I'm doing is at a minimum, I'm creating a shift level work order. But you always have some work order to run the events against, because the work order is supposed to be the abstraction for all the work that was being done on the production line at any given time, okay? Work order management's always there. Number 2, scheduling is always there. Even if you're creating a fake schedule, even if you're creating a shift level schedule or an hourly level schedule, you always have scheduling management. You're at a minimum, you're consuming it from the ERP system and then just mapping it to the events that are happening in your process control in the process. But you are always doing scheduling management. It is a core function. Okay? Overall equipment effectiveness. If you have state, if you have an in-feed count, an out-feed count, and a waste count, and you have a standard rate, those 5 parameters, and of the 3 counts, only got to have 2 of them. You can abstract the third one from any of the other 2. If you always have those things. It's literally the first 5 data points you're connecting to when you're putting MES in. What is the state of this asset? Is it running? Is it stopped? Is it an alarm? Is it choked? Is it starved? It's literally fucking after connectivity, after connect and collect, store, the first analyze is what state. Okay? Like job fucking 1. All right? When you have those things, you already have OEE. Whether you're actually running it through an OEE engine, well, I mean, that's up to you, but you got OEE. It's a core function. And you want to know what the subsets of that core function are? The availability of the equipment, the performance of the operator, and the quality of the product you're producing. You can't have OEE about those 3 things. Rick Bellotta is very big on OEE as a garbage number for running a business. I want to point something out. Rick and I disagree on the value of OEE, but we don't disagree on whether or not OEE is the number you should use to run your business. I don't agree you should be using OEE. You should be using cost per unit, okay? You should be using cost per asset. You should be using real dollar numbers. I own businesses. I'm ultimately getting everything down to a cost and revenue per unit, whatever unit it is. If that unit is the thing coming off the widget, whatever, okay? And then I want the subsets of that. So if my net revenue is gross revenue minus gross cost, then what I'm looking for is where do all the costs come from? Oh, they come from quality loss. They come from performance loss. Okay. I agree with Rick that I'm not making my decisions based on the OEE number. You are figuring out what to solve at the plant layer, the problems you need to solve using OEE. You also know you are making the decisions about your adjustment to capacity using TEEP. Okay, if you're calculating OEE, you might as well calculate TEEP. They go hand in hand. You have the same numbers. Okay, OEE is a very, very valuable number. And MES, if we were going to say MES was one function, just a function, it's going to be work order tracking. So planning of a work order and then tracking it across the process. And the number 2 function, OEE. It is a core function. And then downtime tracking. Okay. The reason downtime tracking, the reason we call it out, it's a subset of OEE. But the reason we call it out is you'd be surprised at the number of MES implementations where you're doing a proof of concept, where the only thing you're doing in phase 1 is downtime tracking. That's it. It's the only thing they care about. It's just the state. Bring the state in, route all those events, categorize them, and then report on them. It is a core function. You're always doing it in the proof of concept. Always. Sometimes it's the only fucking thing you're doing. All right. Beyond the basics. So this is where it kind of gets controversial. So recipe management, yes, it is not a core function. Digital quality inspection plans, DQIP, yes, it is not a fucking core function. Here's how we know it's not a core function. There are times where you never even put a QIP into an MES system for fucking years. For years. Okay? It's not a core function. SPC, statistical process control. I think more and more SPC is getting put directly to the edge. It's not even happening in the MES layer anymore. Inventory management, digital work instructions, plus hundreds others. All right, let's look at what people had to say. 100% agree, blah, blah, blah. All right, Thomas Subert. Let's start with Thomas Subert. He said, quality is not beyond the basics. It is usually the core reason why manufacturers deploy MES and support a product track and trace. Not true. It is not usually. This is not true. I would love to have Thomas Subert come on the podcast. I have done thousands of MES implementations in my career, and the number 1 reason manufacturers do it in MES, it's not even fucking close. It's not even close. The number 1 reason that they're doing MES is they want insight into current state in real time. The number 2 reason is I want to be able to compare unlike assets using a like number. That's what OEE is. OEE gives you the ability to take 2 processes that are completely unrelated and use one number to be able to compare the 2. Okay, that's why it's a really critical thing. How do I know which asset I invest my time and money into if they're 2 completely different processes? If I just use the units that come off the end of the line as the metric, the absolute number, this one produces 100, this one produces 1,000, that means nothing to me. That's just data. It's just an event. I need the abstraction. I need the information, which is OEE. Okay? That's the number two reason. Number one is insight into current state. Number two is I need to measure performance across all my assets. That's number two. Where do I think quality in service of product track and trace comes in? It's probably a top 5 reason why people do MES. It is absolutely not usually the core reason. Not even fucking close. Not even close. Okay? Also, materials handling, including line side supply chain replenishment, is also a non-basic MES function. That is not true. Again, you cover the basics, but this is in a confusing manner. No, it is not, Thomas. You need to spend more time on the plant floor. Here's what I can tell you. Thomas spends a lot of time talking to people who work on the carpeted side of the business, because only a person, Josh Dingus, by the way, if you look at Joshua Dingus, so Joshua Dingus is a guy who works on the plant floor, and he's an important fucking guy. Okay? He's an important guy. Okay? He's not, Thomas should be listening to Joshua. Joshua shouldn't be listening to Thomas. A problem in our industry is that people like Thomas don't listen to enough to guys like Joshua Dingus. You want to know why? Because Josh is a frontline guy. Okay, he's a frontline guy who has a lot of power and who has a strong mandate to do more with less using digital in his organization. A very strong mandate. Okay, Thomas should be listening to what Josh has to say. Josh shouldn't be listening to what Thomas has to say. Josh is the one who's got the problem. Thomas is the one who thinks he has the answer. Thomas is wrong. Now, I don't want to pick on Thomas here. I wish I could leave his name out of it. Okay, but I have to point this out. The people who liked his post are fucking wrong. I am happy if you take that. Take Thomas Subert, take the 4 people who gave him a like, and come on the podcast. Let's have a round table. Let's have a round table, and we'll talk about just this topic. And you can make your case, and I'll talk about all the systems I've done. In fact, we'll go back. I'll go back through all of the statements of work. I'll go back through all the original complaints the clients had, all the original complaints they had, and I will show you the percentages of them who said quality is the core reason in pursuit of track and trace. It's 1. I already know who it is. And guess what? Track and trace was done at the very end of the proof of concept. The very end. 1 fucking time. And you want to know why it was included in the proof of concept? Because the amount of time it took them, they calculated the total number of man hours to do traceability when they would get they're in tier 1 automotive, they would get a quality report, they would get a quality return, and they would have to try and take that back and do a complete genealogy. I think something like 122 different events went into manufacturing that unit. 6 weeks. 2 engineers, 6 weeks. So you do the math. Okay, first off, they were selling the unit for like $211. Okay, but they were spending $10,000 doing traceability every time they got a quality return. So the only reason they front loaded it was because it was taking them 6 weeks to do it manually with paper. Okay. Let's look at Darren Phipps. I'd agree with some of the comments. Quality and track and trace are pretty important functionality in MES currently. Quality is. Quality is a subset of OEE. You can't calculate OEE without quality. I wouldn't overlook the integration ERP. It's a critical function. It's not, again, I think you need to understand what's the difference between core 4, okay? Everything builds out from the core 4. Everything builds out from the core 4. Traceability, if you look at how I'm doing traceability, okay, how do I do track and trace? Well, what I have to do is connect initially just purely raw materials, the lot numbers for purely raw materials that come in from other suppliers. I have to connect those things to the sub-assemblies that get put together, if we're looking at linear manufacturing, sub-assemblies that get put together, and they go from asset to work in progress to asset to work in progress to finished good. I get to finished good, and what I want to do is I want to do track and trace all the way back to those raw materials. I want to see every event. Okay. Most people, when they talk about traceability, here's how you know it's not a core function. Because track and trace isn't the same to everybody. Okay, so if somebody says, I want track and trace, sometimes what they mean is I just want the raw materials that went into this. Some people say, I want to know every operator, the raw materials, and every subassembly that went into this. I want to know every operator. I want to know I want to know what the OEE calculation was. I want to know. I want part of my traceability any significant downtime events while that unit was being made. It's not the same thing. It's depending upon who you're asking. Track and trace is different. Okay, so no, it's not a fucking core function MES. It is a important function, but it's not a core function. And you will notice all of the key elements, all the non-essential functions, they extend from the core. In order for me to calculate OEE, I have to have connections and collect events that I need to use everywhere else, including in track and trace. Okay? Integration to ERP is a critical function. No question, integrating to ERP is important. Here's how you know it's not a core function. If you do a MES proof of concept, 99 times out of 100, there's no ERP integration until 6, 9, 12 months down the road. You abstract it. I'd also vote a core value of MES is finite scheduling, which takes the capacity planning. Again, important function, but not a core function. And here's how you know. Not everyone does it. All right, that's it. All right, so let me quickly put a bow on this. My position is that everyone is going to build their MES. You can buy tools, and then you can extend them, but you're going to build. Okay. My position is that every MES system is unique to the manufacturer. There's no two MES systems out there that are alike. There are SCADA systems out there that are fucking identical. I mean, I remember looking at an ABB supervisor control and data acquisition system that ran a rolling mill in steel industry that I worked in. And I went to like our 13 other rolling mills plus our competitors who are all using the ABB stands and the distributed control system. And it was the same. It was literally identical. There was no difference. You know, it was like SCADA was SCADA was SCADA. It always has been, always will be. MES is not MES is not MES. MES is a word we use to describe all the unique functions in a business that you use to convert things you sold and plan to manufacture into the actual successful manufacturing of those things. And that is your core IP. It's your core function of your business. Okay? The reason we did the MES bootcamp and the reason we're doing the accelerator is because this is one of the number one requests we get. And we have to teach people the process. Where do I start? If I want to do any MES, if I want to do track and trace, can I start with track and trace? No. I have to start with the individual. I have to start with the connect, collect, store. Track and trace is analyze, visualize. Okay? It is an analyze, visualize function that bolts into what we've connected to, we've collected, and we've stored. We have to teach you how to build the data models, the ingress points, how we relay events from in-feed, out-feed state and waste into the ingestion engine that goes into an OEE calculator, and how we compare that data with standard rate and the start of the runtime so that we can get just a simple calculation of what our performance has been over time. Okay? All right, that's it. Please do me a favor, like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll fucking see you in the next one.